So, what would actually happen if the bottom of the globe just disappeared? Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're tackling the ultimate apocalyptic scenario. If Antarctica melted, what would happen to our world? Look, we hear about ice melting all the time, but it's honestly really hard to visualize the true scale of it. Today, we're going to separate the extreme hypotheticals from the hard scientific realities and see exactly what happens when that frozen vault breaks open. To really put this into perspective, we have to ask, what if 25.4 million cubic kilometers of Antarctic ice melted? Think about that for a second. Antarctica holds a staggering 90% of all the ice on Earth and roughly 60% of our entire planet's fresh water. It is a massive, continent-sized vault. We want to know what goes down if every last drop of that vault suddenly turns to liquid and pours straight into our oceans. Well, the answer starts with this number right here, 70 meters, or about 230 feet. Imagine standing right where you are right now and looking up, way up, 230 feet into the air. That is the literal wall of water that would redistribute around the globe. It would completely erase coastlines as we know them. The map of the Earth? We'd have to completely redraw it. We're talking total geographic reshaping. Florida, literally gone. Entirely underwater. The Netherlands and Bangladesh would be totally flooded out. And actually, here's a wild fact. Australia would gain a massive inland sea. But the human toll is absolutely the most profound part of this whole scenario. Up to 40% of the world's population would be displaced. We are talking about billions of people being forced to pack up and migrate inland, away from our current coastal hubs. And this brings us to a fascinating geological phenomenon called isostatic rebound. It perfectly illustrates just how insanely heavy 25 million cubic kilometers of ice really is. Think of a massive cargo ship sitting low in the water. If you take all the heavy shipping containers off, the ship bounces upward, right? Well, if you took all the ice away, the Antarctic tectonic plate, the actual bedrock of the continent itself, would bounce upward too. Of course, because we're talking about massive slabs of the Earth's crust, this rebound would take tens of thousands of years to reach a new equilibrium, but it's a crazy concept to think about. Moving on to Section 1, the realistic scientific timescale. Okay, before we all panic and head for the mountains, let's pivot from that extreme what-if scenario to reality. A total melt giving us 70 meters of rise is an apocalyptic scenario. It would take thousands of years and require global temperatures to rise way beyond our current extreme models. The actual scientific consensus, our realistic projection is between 11 centimeters and 1 to 2 meters of sea level rise by the year 2100, largely depending on our emissions trajectory. And look, while 1 or 2 meters sounds pretty small compared to 70, it is still incredibly dangerous and globally disruptive. Let's look at how this timeline actually builds out. Right now, present day, warming southern ocean waters are already chewing away at the ice shelves from below, weakening them. By 2050, the cascading effects really start to hit. Things like river salinity increasing, which studies suggest could cause a massive 15.6% decline in crucial global rice yields. By 2100, we hit that potential 1 to 2 meters of global sea level rise. And if we look 2,000 years out, that's when we could see the potential total collapse of massively vulnerable areas, like the Wilkes and Aurora basins over in East Antarctica. All right, Section 2, threatening our coastal cities. Even without a total Antarctic melt, a realistic rise of just a few feet brings an immediate, catastrophic threat to coastal infrastructure worldwide. The economic devastation here is staggering. Under high-emission scenarios with about 1.8 meters of sea level rise by 2100, Vietnam could see annual flood damage equivalent to a devastating 28% of its GDP. In China, they could face flood damages costing up to $8.5 trillion per year. The threat to developing and highly populated coastal nations is absolutely monumental. But we aren't just talking about abstract lines on a graph here. This is about the daily reality of flooded coastal communities. We're looking at much more frequent high tides, worsening storm surges, and just the slow, inevitable creep of seawater into freshwater systems and living rooms. This is the reality of people just trying to survive encroaching waters. Globally, the numbers are almost too big to even wrap your head around. $14 trillion. Without significant mitigation or adaptation, that is the estimated annual global cost of coastal flooding by 2100, with just a 1 meter sea level rise. We're talking about global infrastructure, homes, bridges, and ports simply washed away or rendered totally unusable. Because of this, cities are being forced into a process called managed retreat, basically moving people away from the water. But this kicks off a brand new socioeconomic crisis: climate gentrification. As developers and wealthier homeowners flee the flooded coasts, they naturally look for higher ground inland. In places like Miami, this is causing real estate values to artificially spike in historically low-income, higher-elevation neighborhoods like Liberty City and Little Haiti. It's essentially pushing out the local residents who have lived there for generations.
Which brings us to Section 3, Ocean and Climate Chaos.
See, this crisis isn't just about more water flooding the ocean, it is fundamentally about the type of water and how it literally breaks the Earth's internal machinery. It's a massive domino effect. Step 1. The ice melting pours pure, fresh water right into the highly saline Antarctic Ocean. Step 2. This fresh water dilutes the heavy, salty water that usually sinks to the bottom. This essentially jams up the Southern Ocean overturning circulation, which is basically the ocean's global conveyor belt. And step 3, because this conveyor belt is what distributes heat around the entire planet, weakening it drastically alters the global climate. We're talking major shifts in rainfall patterns, even affecting rainfall as far away as Africa and the Northern Hemisphere.
Let's look at Section 4, the wildlife impact. While our cities are facing flooding and gentrification, a tragic biological reorganization is happening right now down in the Antarctic ecosystem, and it all starts at the microscopic level. Step 1. Phytoplankton, often called the grass of the ocean, start to decline. As the ice shrinks, highly nutritious diatoms and phytoplankton are outcompeted. Because of this, we get Step 2. Antarctic krill, which feed on this phytoplankton, are forced to abandon the fastest warming waters. And then Step 3 is the devastating top-level result. Without the krill, the populations of apex predators, like emperor penguins and baleen whales, face a severe crash. The entire food web basically collapses from the bottom up. Tragically, as the ice disappears and the whole ecosystem shifts, scientists estimate that up to 80% of emperor penguin colonies could decrease in size or just vanish entirely by the next century. 80%! They rely entirely on stable sea ice to breed and survive. Without it, their future is incredibly bleak. And finally, Section 5, the most away. We've covered a ton of ground in this explainer today, from those apocalyptic what-ifs to the very real scientific trajectory of our coasts, our oceans, and our wildlife. So what is the ultimate bottom line? Well, the science is explicitly clear on these 3 points. First, a complete 70-meter total melt is not currently imminent. That is a scenario for thousands of years in the future. Second, however, highly vulnerable areas like the West Antarctic ice sheet are nearing dangerous tipping points that could lock in meters of sea level rise much, much sooner than that. And third, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius drastically reduces these risks, potentially keeping ice loss relatively stable for the rest of this century. And that leaves us with this final thought. We know the dominoes are wobbling right now. The ice is melting, the oceans are rising, and the ecosystem is shifting. But that extreme apocalyptic scenario, that isn't our destiny yet. It's just a warning. So the ultimate question is, what choices are we going to make today to stop those dominoes from falling? Because whether that ice stays at the bottom of the world or ends up flooding our coastal streets is entirely up to us. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.